Hello everyone, welcome to JS Gigs and my name is Deepak. This is going to be a very important chapter in the entire series of CI of Cypress framework. So in this chapter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be basically talking about the CI pipeline. And if you do not know what CI pipeline is, I would still recommend you to go through some of the tutorial available out there on the YouTube or elsewhere or read some articles around it. However, I'll give you a quick brief of what CI is all about. We are also going to be talking about GitHub Actions and the GitHub workflows, post which we are going to be basically creating a GitHub Actions, and then we are going to be creating a main.yaml file in order to create and run the test cases in the pipeline. We are not really going to be covering the Cypress cloud in this tutorial. We are going to be doing that probably in the next. However, in this tutorial, I'm going to be keeping it very simple. I'm going to be talking about all the points that I've just listed here. So without further ado, let's just get rolling. Now let me take you to the browser where I have opened the CI documentation. And if you look closely here, it basically talks about what continuous integration is all about. And post that, it talks about how to really set up the CI for Cypress test cases for various different providers. So if you look at here, you have CI providers examples available here. You also have the AWS code build, Bitbucket pipeline, Circle CI, GitHub Actions, and GitLab CI. What we are going to be talking more in detail is about GitHub Actions. But before that, I just want to explain you what continuous integration is all about, and we will move to the GitHub Action post that. So continuous integration, as the name itself suggests, meaning the integration of your code continuously with your main branch. So what really happens is, let's say if you commit a code and if you do some changes in your branch. So once you make some changes, or otherwise, let me take you to the code editor of mine. And if you look here, so there are these many changes available right now. Okay. So what really happens is that, or otherwise, let me do one change. So what we have done is we have basically set up the Cypress in the previous tutorial. And also, if you look, we had copied these two folders from the previous one, where the getting started example and advanced example. And I think I don't really think so these two really needs to be the part of our setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be ignoring these all in. So let me just write it down like this: Cypress E2E, and then I'm going to be one hyphen getting started, everything inside it, advanced examples, and everything inside it. So ideally now it should be up. So if you look closely over here, you would notice that we have made changes in the code, sometimes into E2E, login CY, and in the auth service as well. So let's say if you make any changes and if you try to commit that, the idea of testing or idea of unit testing or end-to-end testing in any code repository is to really assess the quality of the code. And also you must access these test cases which are written against your application, basically test the quality of your code. And also by mistake, you haven't really stepped on something and broken the existing functionality. So in order to do this, we do write test cases, and that's exactly what we have written in the E2E login.cy.ts, which is an end-to-end test for login.cy.ts. So what really happens is the moment I do I commit some changes, I also want to see I'm not really breaking any feature. So let's say if you are a new developer in your team and you are new to this team and you do not really know what the features are all about, and the moment you take a checkout and you start to change the code, you accidentally break the existing change or the existing feature. So you would never know until you test it. And how do we test it? Using the Cypress end-to-end test or probably the component test. And to integrate it, and then how do we test it? The moment your change is committed, the idea here is that we must run the test cases against all that commits, right? So this is called continuous integration, meaning integration of your test cases and integration of your code with the test cases continuously. So you're basically integrating it every moment, every now and then, or every time you make a commit. So these are all the examples from the previous tutorial. So what I'm going to do is, like, before I start making changes for this particular tutorial, I'm going to be committing this all. So how do I commit it? It's fairly simple. I'm going to be writing a commit message first, or let me make a change here. I don't think so that I need a 10 seconds delay here. So let me remove this. Let me close this, and error username, everything else is set up. db dot the login is also set up. So let me just close this. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be committing this change. Please note that all these changes are actually available in my repository. So if you go onto the GitHub and if you try to look at this particular repository, or otherwise, let me just show you there. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be taking you to the browser, and here are the browser. You can look at it's right here, and this is student entry. Cypress is basically the is the repository that I'm committing all my code under. If you also want to take a check out of this particular repository, you are most welcome to do so. And if you're liking my work, you can also give me the star on this particular repository or any other work that you have been following along. So now again, let me take you back to the code editor, and I've already committed the change. Okay, so let me close this down here and also close this. So we have understood what CI is all about. We have also seen it here in the documentation. Now let me take you back to the GitHub Actions. And before I start talking about GitHub Actions, I'm also going to be talking about GitHub Workflows. So if you're not aware about GitHub Actions or GitHub Workflow, I would request you to read more about it in their documentation. But before that, before I begin to explain, or I begin to write the CI test cases or the CI pipeline for my application, I would want to give you the overview of these two terminology. Okay, so let me take you to the browser, and here is the browser. I've already spoken about the CI as continuous integration, and now I'm going to be talking about the GitHub Actions. And under the GitHub Actions, there are a few external link given over here. So first is this one, the second is this one. So let's just open both of these and try to read what these all are about, right? So let me start with the GitHub Actions. So please understand, GitHub actions here is not really used as a verb, it is used as a noun. So what it means is that a GitHub action is a noun, which means it is an entity. And if you look at the first paragraph that it describes about GitHub Action, it tells us that GitHub Action is a continuous integration and continuous delivery platform that allows you to automate your build, test, and deployment pipeline. You can create workflow that run test whenever you push a change on your repository that deploy merges pull request to production, right? So what it essentially means is that GitHub Action is a platform for our CI/CD needs, right? So that as you can see over here in the first paragraph, it is very clearly written over here, right? So what it means is that we have already spoken about CI, and CD essentially means that you are also deploying that in the server. We are not really going to be doing the CD per se in this tutorial. We are only going to be focusing around the CI thing, meaning the continuous integration, wherein we will write a workflow, and then we will, in that workflow, the moment your code is committed, we will run the test cases and we'll see how that really works in case of a GitHub Actions, right? Because the repository that we are using is also GitHub, and we have not really used Bitbucket or GitLab or any other CI tool for that matter. But then if you want to know more about these, there is a pretty detailed documentation available here, the Cypress documentation, and you can read anything that you like, right? So if you have, let's say, a AWS code build, so you can very well come over here and can read about it, like how to do the code build and CI setup for AWS code build, and similarly for the Circle CI, Bitbucket pipeline, or GitLab CI. But let's just focus on the GitHub Actions, particularly for this particular tutorial. And if you want to know more anything about this or the other flavors, please do write down in the comment section below. I'll probably try to cover these in a separate video tutorial, but then in this particular tutorial, I'm going to be focusing only on the GitHub Actions, right? So we have understood what CI is all about. We have also understood what GitHub Actions is all about. And now let's just talk about the GitHub workflow, right? So let's just close this and let me take you here. right? So if you scroll down here before we move to the workflow, so GitHub Actions essentially works, and a combination is basically a combination of different tasks. And how do you perform a task, or how do you tell your GitHub to do certain tasks, is using a workflow. Let's just click on it. So let's just read what workflow is all about, and then we'll try to implement one. So if you look here closely, the about workflow section, again, the first paragraph, which describes what workflow is all about. So it tells us that a workflow is a configurable automated process that will run one or more jobs. Workflows are defined by YAML file checked into your repository and will run when triggered by an event in your repository, or they can be triggered manually or at any defined schedule, right? So there are a few things very clear about it from the definition of it, meaning it is basically triggered within the repository, and there has to be some file written which is ending with .yml extension, which will control how my workflow will look like. And there has to be a trigger, meaning a push, a merge, a commit, or whatever. So that's something we are going to be seeing that in a moment. And now let me take you to the drawing board here, right? And then draw something. Let me just try to help you understand what it is really all about, right? So here's the pen. So let's say this is my repository. So in this repo, let's say if you have taken one branch, right? So let's say this branch is B1. And if you are committing a change in the B1 branch, right? And that's when a test case must run, right? Right. So essentially what really happens in this case is that the moment you create a branch and the moment you commit your changes over here, a test case is getting started, right? This entire process is called CI. That's a continuous integration, right? And in this entire process, and how it is done and who controls it is basically being controlled by workflow. And this is basically going to be part of the GitHub, right? And this entire process, as controlled by workflow, this workflow will be basically driven by a particular file, and that file is going to be, let's say, main dot YAML, right? So let's just repeat again. So what we're going to do is, like, we're going to be basically creating a branch, or even if you don't create a branch, the moment we push our changes in the repository, this is going to be triggering a test suite. So this is step number 1. This is step number 2, meaning triggering the test suite. And this entire stuff is actually dependent on GitHub Workflow. And this GitHub Workflow is determined by main.yml file. And that's what we are going to be creating now. So let's just go back to the code editor, and that's where we are going to be creating all of this. So here, if you look closely, what I've done is, like, there is another GitHub action, and then this is something. The moment you create a first GitHub workflow, you would be prompted to have this extension, and please include this extension because it gives you an entire overview of how your workflow is performing and whatever really happens in the cloud, and that's something you would also be able to see here, right? So what I'm going to do is, like, as I said, the first and the foremost step is to basically create a GitHub workflow file. And how do you create one? So it's fairly simple. Let's just create a folder with the name GitHub, and inside GitHub I'm going to be creating a folder, let's say workflows, and inside a workflow I'm going to be creating a file, let's say while.yaml, and it's here, right? And the content of this particular file is something that we are going to be taking up from the Cypress documentation. So let me take you back to the Cypress documentation, and here is the documentation, and here the GitHub action. That's what we're going to be talking about. We have also already seen what GitHub Actions is all about. And before I write this YAML file, or let me just write this YAML file first, and then I'll give you a gist of what really it is. Okay, so let me copy the content of this YAML file here. Let me save this. Okay, now let me try to explain what this YAML file is all about. So in this YAML file, okay, so let me take you back to the code editor. And here at the code editor, I'm going to be explaining what all of these is all about. So firstly, the name. The name itself suggests that it is going to be running the Cypress test for the dependency, and post that it is going to be caching the artifacts. And here, if you look at the line number 3, it tells us that on push, it is going to be doing that. We have also spoken briefly about when workflows are getting triggered. So we then spoke about what triggers are. So on line number 3, this is the trigger. So which means it is going to be triggering the CI pipeline at the time when you push the code, right? Now, if you look closely at the line number 5, it tells us that these are the jobs inside it. And what are these jobs? So there are essentially 2 jobs over here. First is the install, the other one is a Cypress run. So what is install, right? So install meaning it runs on firstly on Ubuntu 22.04, which means that whenever you do a code push, it is basically going to be having an Ubuntu 22.04. Ubuntu is an operating system. If you don't know, I believe that if you're a developer, you must be aware what Ubuntu is all about. So Ubuntu is nothing but an operating system there wherein your dependencies would be installed and your test cases are going to be running. So it's going to be running on Ubuntu 22.04, but there are various different versions available. You can basically choose Windows, and you can also choose Mac and whatever it is, right? So, but all the details of it, you can actually find in the documentation, and you can choose anything you like. So on Ubuntu 22.04, it is going to be performing these steps. So what are these steps? They are going to be 3 steps. The first one is the checkout. And here, if you look, it is having an actions /checkout @04. What is @04 and what is checkout and what is action? So to know more about this, I'll take you back to the browser, and also let me open the documentation. Right. So if you look here at just read about this particular paragraph. So it says that workflow can be packaged and shared as GitHub Actions. GitHub maintains many such checkout, upload, download, artifact actions used below. The official Cypress GitHub action is maintained by Cypress and our community to help ease the setup of Cypress in a GitHub action. The action provides dependency installation via npm yarn on pnpm, built-in caching of node dependencies, and additional configuration option for advanced workflows. So GitHub actions are basically these actions which are written by the GitHub team or sometimes by open source community, like in this particular case. So let me just open both of these. Okay, so as it says that GitHub basically maintains lots such actions. So one of which is a checkout, and the other one as it says is upload, download, artifact actions. Okay, so let's just see here. Let me open this one. GitHub Actions makes it easier to automate all your software workflows. Now the world-class CI/CD build, test, and deploy your code right from the GitHub. Make code reviews, branch management, and issue triaging work the way you want, right? So now if you look at this particular documentation, it gives you exactly what I've already spoken to you about, that let's say if you want to build or if you want to run your test in Linux, Mac OS, or Windows. In our case, we are basically going to be running that on Ubuntu Ubuntu version 22. So here you can choose any one of it, and how you can choose it basically through actions, and all these actions are written and already available with the GitHub, right? So as in our case, what we have done is like we have made use of one of the GitHub action. So let me also take you to basically the repository or the marketplace where all these actions are placed. So if you look at this is a checkout action, GitHub action here. So what it does is that it basically checks out your repository at a particular path and then does what it really needs to do. And right, so a GitHub workflow is basically a set of commands or set of tasks performed, and then those tasks are performed through GitHub Actions. And this GitHub Actions is one of which is a checkout, and we are, as the version over here is version 4, so that is why in our code editor, if you look closely over here, we have given the version 4, right? So actions, again, this is something which is maintained by GitHub and is available at the actions repository, as we had seen previously in the browser, like the one over here. So once you check out, and we also try to give the exact version, because sometimes what really happens is that it's a normal case with any, I think all the other application that we use, probably Java, Node, Angular, React, or anything. So you really need a particular version for an application to work properly, because you do testing or you do all your workflows or all your coding in a particular version, right? So it is really important to have this version also set. If it is not really set, then it may happen that some of the version may clash, and probably that's the reason why package.json is maintained in the UI repository. So if you want to know more about it, you can very well come over here and can look at it. And let me just take you to the actions page. And if you look here, all these actions are available. So you can do basically a lot more with GitHub Actions which are available. You can see there are more than 500 pages available over here, right? So all these 500, like what are the, let's say if you have a particular task, please do come down here, and then when you come here, you may be able to see what you're really looking for and can download things from here, right? So GitHub Actions is pretty awesome thing, and all these marketplace where it lists the tasks that you can do through the GitHub Actions can be seen here. You can basically bookmark this particular page if you haven't really done so all that while. Please do so and make use of it, right? So now let me again take you back to the GitHub, the Cypress documentation, and here in the Cypress documentation, I think we've already spoken about versions. We've also spoken about the build. We've also spoken about the action marketplace. We've also spoken about what YAML file is all about and things like that. Okay, now let me take you back to the code editor, and here at the code editor, now I think that we can move to the next step. So the next step is Cypress install, and please note here that in some places you see actions written, and in some places you see Cypress IO written. You can see here the line number 40 and also the line number 13, and what it essentially means is that Cypress is also something which is maintaining the actions. So how it is different from the GitHub action? Essentially they are same, just that the maintainer for these actions is different. When you write actions, it is basically the action which is coming from the GitHub are listed over here, and when you write down cypress.io or cypress-io, these are the actions which are written in the Cypress repository. So let's go back to the browser, and the browser, what I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be taking you to the Cypress GitHub action documentation. So let's just come here and GitHub actions. Yeah, so here you can see all these actions which are written for Cypress. So Cypress runs on, these are jobs, actions, and all of these. You can find a detailed video tutorial. You can find a detailed tutorial of, you can find a detailed documentation over here. So you can just read about it and can work with it. So I'm just going to be showing you the place like where you can actually read it, but not really going to be explaining everything in detail, right? So I'm just not going to be explaining each and every action. I'm just going to be telling you the place where you can find all the Cypress-io related actions. Okay, so now again let me take you back to the code editor, and there at the code editor, if you look, it essentially tells us that it is going to be installing the Cypress, and post Cypress install it is also going to be doing, and this post install it is going to be running test as false build npm run build, right? So it is going to be running this particular action with these two commands. All right, similarly, if you come over here, same build folder. So how it is going to be saving the build folder is through the action which is defined by GitHub, which tells us upload -artifactory version 4 with the name build, and if no files found, it is going to be throwing an error and the path is build, right? So essentially it is slightly different. It is not really the build in our case. It has to be dist. But then we will see, what really happens in the repository when we commit this particular code, right? And the next job that we are going to be running is Cypress run. In case of a Cypress run, it is again going to be running on Ubuntu 24.22.04, and it needs install first. What it does is that it checks out the code, download the folder, and then it is going to be running the npm start and the Chrome. All right, so let me just commit this and let me take you to the browser and show how the repository really looks like at this moment. So let me close each and every other open browser windows, and I'm going to be taking you to my profile. And there in my profile, you have the student's entry as Cypress. So if you look here, actions, you would find it pretty much empty, right? So there is nothing available here. It just tells us that if you really need to start the GitHub action, do so, right? So we are not really going to be doing any of it. Then let me first commit the main.yml file, and let's see that what really change happens here in this particular repository, right? So if you come here, you have main.yml. So let me run this. So this is chapter, or let me commit this, and done. Now let me take you back to the browser and show you what really happens. We have committed the change. Let me just quickly refresh this page. There you go. So what it tells is that the moment you click on the action, now it has changed. As we had seen previously, it is going to be doing the two jobs. The first is to basically install, the other one is to run, and then you can see all of these happening here at the actions tab itself. And if you click on it, it does the first job. It is currently basically installing. The moment you click on it, you will be able to see what really happens in the background. As you can see, all these things are running. So if you remember, we had basically 3-step process. So all these 3 steps are going to be running over here. So let's just wait until this finishes. So if you want to read what really happening in the background, you can basically come here and can read the log, and you will be able to understand what really happens in the background. Right? This is important to see, because there's something where if you have any error, you would be able to rectify it also. So the first error that we receive here is that the budget 500 KB was not met by 320.79 KB of total 820.79 KB. So in order to fix it, let me just take it to the code editor, and there at the code editor, I'm going to be opening the angular.json. And if you look here, budgets, so here let me give 12 KB here, 6. So let me make it 900 probably, or let's say 1000. And then let's commit this once again and take you back to the browser. And there you go. Now you can see that the third build is running here. So let's just click it to see what really happens in the background. So you may see that all of it runs here. Okay, so now you see that at least the first error was gone, and after that it basically encountered another error. If you look closely over here, the error reads as no file were found with the provided path, build.no artifact will be uploaded. So now, as I was mentioning earlier, the code editor, let me take you back to the code editor, and there the code editor, if you open the workflow file over here, so which is main.yml, if you notice here, what it really tells is that it is going to be generating a build. But whereas whenever we do a build in case of our Angular application, it really makes a dist folder, not really a build folder. And what here we have written in the main.yml file is to wait for the dist folder, or to wait for the build folder to appear, and post that it changes. However, this is not the case. So in order to fix this error, what we really need to do is to change our main.yml file such that it doesn't really wait for the build folder, rather it does the dist. Okay, so save build folder. So I'm going to be changing this to dist here as well. Save this, and here also, both these places I'm going to be making it dist, right? And I think that this error must also go. The reason why I am not really changing everything in Postgre is to basically show you how to read an error and how to debug an error if you receive one in case of a CI pipeline. In particular, in our case, it is in a GitHub action. So let me just commit this as well. All right, so now let me take you back to the browser. And the browser, you would notice that another build would have started. So now you can see that the build, or basically the first job, has started. So setup job, checkout, Cypress install, and save the build folder. So I believe all these 4 would succeed now. All right, so now you can see that the install, which is the first job, has completed successfully. Here you can just come over here and click on each one of these steps to see what really happened in the background. So now you can see that post checkout, what really needs to happen, and save folder and everything else like Cypress install. So you may notice that all these artifacts are generated and they can be downloaded at these many places. All of these logs are available here, right? So it tells us that completed job, right? Cleaning up often process. So that's how it is. So now let's focus on the second one, which is basically the Cypress run. And let's just wait. So now this is going to be really, really important. So I want all of you to focus your attention here and see what really happened, and I'll explain you why it is happening. Okay, so now if you notice carefully what really happened in the background, okay? So we were basically running the test cases locally after running the browser. That was the first step. And the second step was basically starting the web app and then hitting and clicking on the login to basically log in and see if that works or not. Whereas if you look closely, then what it really tells is that it opens up, it basically is waiting for localhost 4200 to boot up. But if you notice here at the line number 37, it says building, meaning the app started building. However, it really did not wait for it to come online, right? So that's why it failed. So that's number one. Number two, the API also for this is not really available because we really need to start the JSON server as well in the background. The JSON server where we have stored the db.json file, the db.json file which renders the API data for our application. So that really needs to happen. So this is also not available here. So if you notice that, so there are essentially going to be two things that we're going to be doing next, right? So, and if you scroll down here, you would notice that, it gives you the summary of the failed test cases and what really happened. So now what we're going to do is like, we're going to be covering up these two gaps. So what are those two gaps? The first one is to basically have the backend server also running locally, which is on the port 3000. And once your application starts at, or the API starts at 3000, we are also going to be starting up the UI app, and your CI pipeline must really wait for your application to boot up, and that's when it really needs to start testing these Cypress test cases, right? So this is how it's going to be happening. And after this change, all these steps must pass. So to do so, let me take you back to the code editor, and there at the code editor, what I'm going to do is like, I'm just going to be reading this particular bit carefully, and also going to be opening the package JSON. Please note that this is really important for you to understand that how it really works in the background. In order to fix this, I'm going to be installing a few dependencies in my project. And please understand that these dependencies are really important for you to run the test cases properly, right? So now let me bring up the first dependency. So as we had already spoken about, there are two steps that we're going to be doing. The first one is to basically start the backend server. So how have we been starting the backend server is by basically writing the command JSON server db.json. If you look here, the db.json is available here with login and a student record as to get APIs and also the post APIs. So what I'm going to do is like, I'm just going to be writing one command here to basically boot up my backend API. So what I'm going to do is like, I'm just going to be writing the command, let's say start API. In order to start the API, what I'm going to do is like, I'm going to be running this particular command, so which is JSON server. So JSON server is already available, I believe. So let's just search it here. Yep, you can see the JSON server is available here. So JSON server is going to be watching the db.json and it's going to be also booting up in the port number 3000. And once this is available, what I'm going to do is like I'm also going to be starting the local. So local meaning the UI app. So what I'm going to do is like I'm writing the command. So the command is basically ng serve proxy, because since it is running on 3000 port and we are going to be booting up our application at 4200, and that's why it really needs to communicate. So the course error should not come if we use the proxy config. And in proxy config, I think I've given a detailed video around it on my tutorial on my YouTube channel. Please go through those tutorial if you are not very well versed with what proxy.conf.json is all about. I'll give you a quick overview, right? So now what really happens is that it starts the API from this command, and then we're going to be starting the local. But in order to do this, we need to run this concurrently, right? So how it happens is that there is a package available which is called concurrently. So let me take you to the browser, and there is the browser. I'm going to be showing you what I really mean. So here's the concurrently npm. So if you come here, it tells you that what it can do. So what we really need is that we need to run two commands properly. So if you see here, so this is how you can actually start those two commands. Otherwise you would have to do a lot of juggling, or you probably will have to write your own or backend script to, or Node.js script to start two commands together. But using the concurrently, we could do it. Now you can see that it is fairly a popular library available out there, and all you need to do is to basically install this here. Let me just copy this, take you back to the code editor, and there is the code editor. I'm going to be running this, and also I'm going to be installing this in the save dev mode. So let it run. It takes a moment, and then it installs. So once it is installed, I'm going to be writing another command, so which is basically start. I believe I already have a start. So let me change that command instead. What I need is concurrently. There are two commands that I need to start. So first is npm run API, and then npm run start local. But please understand that the problem here is that the moment you start an API and the local, here when you're doing it locally, it really does not throw any error, because both of them can concurrently start, and we have good enough time to go back to the browser and do the test, and by then these two would be started. So we assume it so, right? And then we cannot really guarantee that both of them, at least one of, so we cannot guarantee that both of them would be running by the time the Cypress test starts to run. Why? Because here, if you look at here, with parameter for the Cypress run, it starts the npm start and do the cron, and this particular action basically starts the test for your Cypress. For your it starts the test in your Cypress script, right? So it doesn't really wait. So what we're going to do is like we are going to be also making some changes in the main.yaml. So what are those changes? I'm going to be putting in two parameters. So those two parameters basically states that it really needs to wait for your localhost 4200 to boot up, and the wait on time out is 60 seconds. And then the browser in which it's going to be running the test is Chrome. Let's just save this and also take you back to the package JSON. So now if you look closely, what it's going to do is like it is going to be waiting for your 4200 to boot up, but then we haven't really guaranteed that the backend would be running by then, right? So there is another package which we need to install, and that package name is also something which is mentioned in the Cypress documentation. To see that, I'll take you back to the browser, and if you look closely over in the browser, you would notice that so the package name is wait on npm, and if you click over here, you see that this npm package is required to ensure that our backend system must be running before we start the UI system. So how do we use it? It's fairly simple. Whenever you do the npm install, you will have to first of all install the wait on, and post you install the wait on, you would really need to put this in the script and start using it. And how do you do it? It's fairly simple, and that's something which is also given in the documentation. You can, if you want to know more about it, you can very well come over here and can see that what it really does and how it how to use it in the more complex cases. But in our case, I'm going to be just basically using that in the script. Now, do we do that? So in order to do so, let me take you back to the code editor again, and here the code editor. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be, mostly I'm going to be installing the wait on. So npm i-d, just wait for a moment until this installs. And once it is available for us to use, I'm going to be putting this before the local. So what it means is that I'm going to be coming here, and let's just write this down. So what it does is that it waits on your TCP port 3000 to come up, and once it is ready, and that's when it is going to be running the next set of commands, so which is ngserve proxy config. So I think this is pretty much done. I put a wait on TCP 3000. So essentially it's going to be waiting until the port 3000 comes up, and post which it will start the UI, right? And then we are going to be running this all together in the start, as you can see over here, line number 6. So concurrently, npm run start API and npm run start locally, right? Let's see how it really functions. But before that, I'm just going to be putting that and committing this change in the repository. So concurrently and implemented. So let's just save everything, committed, and sync changes. Click OK. It takes a moment, and let me take you back to the browser. So there, the browser, I'm going to be here, click here again, and there you go. Now you can see that the 5th one, the committing message, is running over here. And then let's just wait until it finishes, and let's see where it stays and what really it does. Now you can see that the install job has been completed successfully. It is now running the Cypress run, and let's just click on it and see where it exactly is. Let's just wait until it finishes, and then I'll resume the video once it finishes. Start API. Looks like some error. So let me take you back to the code editor, and code editor. Oh, yep. Here's the spelling mistake. start API. I'm sorry. I'm just going to be committing this change right up. And again, take you back to the browser, and let's just wait and see how it functions. The moment we have committed, so it's already started. Let me click on install. You can see that the install has run successfully. However, looks like Cypress run has failed. So let's just see why it has failed. So now you can see that at least it starts the login, and then post that it starts the UI application, and then it's available in the localhost 4200. Okay, so looks like the CSV file data is failing, but otherwise everything else is passed. So let's just quickly go to the code editor, and let me just correct this. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be putting the email and password as given here. The password is password, so I'm just going to be replacing this. So I think I've realized the problem that I'm making. So if you closely look over here, it tells that Cypress under downloads and then test.csv. If you look at the reason why we have downloads folder is precisely to see or this folder really is required when we are downloading any file while we are running the test cases. So this is why download folders are kept here. So what we really need to do is, like, just remove this test.csv from downloads and put that inside the fixture, right? And we will have to change the path from downloads to fixture. Save this, and I think I can remove these additional lines as well. So let me remove this. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be putting this change in the CI pipeline, and let's see how it functions now. So let me put a commit message. And let me take you back to the browser and let's see how it works. Let me restart, and there you go. So let's see if the install finishes, and right after install we'll go to the other step, which is other job, which is basically when the CI pipeline or the workflow would start running the Cypress test cases. So let's see how it functions. Let me go back to the summary. Now just wait for a few seconds until install finishes, and we will click on Cypress, where we'll be able to see how the tests are being run in the CI pipeline. Now we can see that the install has finished successfully. So let me click on the Cypress part, and now we can see that all of these logs are being printed over here. So it takes a moment before it runs the setup job, then the checkout, download the build folder. Now it is basically trying to run the UI and the backend server locally. So let's see how it functions. Now you can see that it has actually started the backend server, which is running at localhost 3000, and it is moving to the next step, which is basically to start the UI app, which is running on 4200. And let's just wait for a while more, where when it starts to run all these 3 test cases that we have written in our end-to-end script. And there you go. So now you can see that it has passed all the 3 test cases. You can see that the third test case, where we had written the CSV file read logic, now it is able to read the CSV file and also really and it is also able to log in into the app, and now it has now it is completed successfully. All right, so thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's all for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, I'm going to be talking about the Cypress Cloud, which is a paid feature, and then we will see how it functions overall in the entire architecture, like how the files are being transferred to Cypress Cloud from the CI workflow, and many other things. So stay tuned, and if you haven't really subscribed to my channel, please do so. And if you're liking my work, please don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel, and also hit the bell icon in case if I post a new video, you would be notified. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in all that while, and I'm going to be seeing you in the next tutorial. Thank you.